Hi, friends.
Welcome to the Nora and Becks podcast.
I'm Nora.
And I'm Becks. This is episode 84, Rendog, part 2.
Part
We'll be
2.
chatting about that.
Yeah. Any overall thoughts regarding the episode?
Overall thoughts, I loved it as per usual. I enjoyed lots of things about it. But initial thoughts is that I think it's a crime that Rendog is single. That makes me really sad. Quite literally how he
Yeah.
said it. You hate to see it.
Yeah, for sure.
Just
I felt that way
learning,
too.
yeah, just learning more about him and so much of his experience and his outlook on life and the people around him and just like caring and providing for people who need it especially, but also just his peer, like the way he views his colleagues and friends and everything. Like he's just a really quality person and
Yeah.
it's just crazy to me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was a really good episode. I loved learning more about Ren's personal life. I think that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't follow his content very closely, so I didn't know really anything. So the
Yeah.
last two episodes have been really cool to learn more about him.
I'll be honest, I think for like when I first was introduced to this community and content, I didn't I didn't know anything about him, but watching the Life series, I knew that a lot of people were British and a lot of people weren't. And my brain was I was very confused what category he fell into because it was like he didn't sound American, but he also didn't sound British. But I was like, maybe it's just a really weird, obscure British accent from some
Yeah,
small part of Britain because they're so varying.
yeah.
Which,
I guess it is more of a Dutch accent,
yeah,
which we both have known people that have Dutch accents. So I am surprised that we didn't pick up on it.
well, okay, but also he doesn't sound Amish.
No, he doesn't.
I don't know. It's very different. But and maybe like part of just I don't
But he
know.
doesn't
I
speak Dutch.
No, he
He
doesn't.
speaks something else.
It's
I don't
like
remember what he
it
said.
was something in the middle, like kind of a mixed language, I feel like he said. That
Yeah.
was kind of
I guess
specific to the region he lived in,
his
but also
accent
had
is a South African accent,
right,
not a
yeah.
Dutch accent necessarily.
Yeah.
But um yeah, it was cool it was cool hearing about the history of South Africa from him. Like I feel like it was cool that he knew so much about it.
Mhm.
I mean, it makes sense. Like I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on our country's history,
Right.
so it makes sense, but I was still like, wow, that's so cool that you know all of that.
Well, and it was very like just like kind and humble that he was very like even just making comments about how he was like, I wouldn't expect anyone who isn't from South Africa to know about South Africa necessarily. Like, everyone knows a
Right.
lot more about their own home country than someone who's a foreigner.
Right.
And it wasn't like oh, you really are, it wasn't like a level of, people feeling ignorant because they didn't know. There's so much history. The world is so big and there's so much
Mhm.
history in the different parts of the world that like there's so much that I still don't know. I feel like I'm
Yeah,
constantly learning new things.
absolutely. Yeah.
History is
Um
so rich.
yeah, and I mean, one of the things that they did talk about was how the all the history in the UK and how cool it is to see structures and um areas of the country that have been there for longer than our countries have even been established.
Mm-hmm.
which is really crazy. Like, that's so cool that there are things that have been around for that long
Yeah.
that we can still look at and, you know, go
Um,
visit. So
I
that was pretty cool,
yeah.
I think.
So you cut out a little bit, so I didn't know what you said,
Oh,
but you're okay.
you're
Don't
good.
worry about it.
No.
That's why there was lag.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Um,
um,
I I guess we should talk a little bit about how he moved to England. Like, that is such a crazy thing to do. Like, moving to a completely different country at a young age is
yeah,
so scary.
yeah, it's really
Um,
wild.
yeah, and it's like I think it would be really cool to move to Europe, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would move there forever. Like, if I ever did move to Europe, it would probably be just a few years, you know? And then I
Right,
would move back. Like, when I was ready to start a family or get married or something, I would be like, okay, well, now I'm going back to home so that I can raise my kids with my family. But
right.
it would be cool to live abroad for some time, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, me personally, I've never even been out of the States as much as I want to travel. I have multiple places I'd love to go. Um, but, I have one of my friends, she lived in France for, I want to say she lived there for like at least a year, if not two. It was for school. She did like 2 out of her 4 years or something. I can't remember the exact details, but like she's, I mean, this has been a couple of years ago, and she was in her like very early 20s when she did this.
Yeah.
And I think she lived with a roommate, someone that she knew, but otherwise she was doing it on her own, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And another friend of mine does full time ministry work now. And so, she's gone on more short overseas trips to places. She's actually been to South Africa. She was there for 3 months. I know she was close to Cape Town, but not in that area.
Yeah.
Which yeah. So like in that sense, I knew a very little amount of South Africa from hearing about her experience.
Yeah.
It was a huge culture shock for her. But more recently, she has spent the last 8 months in Thailand, and that's been like a huge culture shift. But
Yeah.
she certainly loves it there and feels very called there by the Lord. Like she feels more at home there than she has ever felt in the States, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
However, she is also experiencing levels of culture shock, and in the beginning it was very much like it felt right. It felt like home. She loves it there, and she does love it there. But after a prolonged amount of time, she started to experience a lot of homesickness, and just it's been so long since she's been around Americans, and even
Yeah.
just the way that Thai people process their emotions and the way that they communicate is so different from how we do,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
can really take a toll on you after a amount of time. So yeah, it seems like a crazy culture shock. Even if I mean, that's more extreme in terms of speaking another language, but
Yeah.
you know, even if it was from the US to Canada or to the UK, like,
Yeah.
I feel like it would be a pretty, like, some varying degrees of culture shock.
Yeah, for sure. Um, but at the very least, I would love to visit,
Mm hmm.
you know? Um,
Yeah.
and, they also talked about New York. I haven't been there, unfortunately. I really want to
Right.
go someday.
Same, same.
Um, I have a fascination with big cities, and I think that their culture is so fascinating, and I want to experience it. But
Mm hmm.
I just haven't gotten that opportunity yet. So I'm looking forward to whenever that will happen.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but I guess more on the topic of immigration, like it it's crazy. Like when he was talking about his family, it's crazy to me that all of his, like both of his brothers moved to different countries too.
Mm-hmm.
Like how it's very interesting that they all left and went to such different places.
Yeah, very far apart.
It just, like, I feel like immigrating isn't, it's obviously not easy, so it's interesting that it happened so much just in the one family, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But it is
Yeah,
cool
and
that
just
they all have
well, and
different
just like
pieces.
hearing how he described it too, of just like families who immigrate, just like how the family quite literally does shatter, and like
Yeah.
that sounds like such a heartbreaking, like harsh word, but it just like is the truth and just kind of how it goes from his, the
Yeah.
way he was describing it, which is wild. Like I yeah, I can't imagine like being in separate countries from all of my siblings. Granted, I have a much bigger family, but even still, if I had less siblings, I feel like that would make it even harder.
Yeah. And like the thought of flying many hours to visit family rather than driving is just
Yeah, it
so
kind of puts
weird
it in
to me.
perspective.
It's like at many times in my life, it's been driving like 8 to 10 hours to visit family. But
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine having to fly upwards of like 12 hours to visit family. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So, I, I mean, they're doing it, but that just is so, I can't even imagine how difficult that must be.
Yeah.
So, I can understand how he has become a little bit more like, I wouldn't say like he was using the word hard in terms of describing his
Mm-hmm.
emotional capacity, but I think that a better way of putting it would be like resilient.
Yeah.
Um, that he's become more emotionally resilient to things that come up in his life because of the things that he's had to go through because of his immigration.
Yeah. I loved that.
Um,
I loved that Imp and Skizz quickly recognized that, and it's not like they talked him off the wall from what he was saying, but they were like, "I don't think that that is a good representation of what you're trying to say, and I don't think you
yeah,
believe that about yourself either, because we know you." And like,
right.
here's what I see about Ren, and they were just so like
Yeah.
loving and
It's
uplifting,
just
and
a
I'm
word
just like, ah,
choice.
yeah,
But yeah. Um, and the way that I didn't know anything about his charities or any kind of anything regarding that world when it came to Ren. So learning more about that and more about how generous and how invested he is in the well-being of others is it was
mm-hmm,
really encouraging and really really cool to hear about all
yeah.
of the
I think
differences that
that
he's made.
yeah, I mean, and as I've said before, I haven't gotten into hermitcraft until just recently, so I didn't know much about stuff that was going on with the charity events and stuff that Scar and Green and did he say Doc, I think?
I don't remember.
Maybe there were others too, but just
Yeah.
like getting involved with that, and that's so special. And I think it's so cool that he supports some kids who are going through school and education right now.
Yeah.
And just like, you know, he talked about that, just like, oh, it's easy to do because I'm a single guy. And Skizz is like, bro, like, you're being way too humble right now. I know,
There's
just so many people.
0.1% of single guys that do that.
Yeah, I was like, I've never met a single person in my life that is like supporting children to that magnitude. Certainly
Yeah.
not a man. I think I've met some girls, but that,
Yeah.
like, I think that comes from, like, you know, feminine, motherly like a urge, I guess, Like, I can see
Yeah.
that. And I also see the qualities of a man's desire to provide and,
Yeah.
um, you know,
Protect.
yeah. But I just think that it's so much easier to shy away from that kind of responsibility, which is
Yeah.
why I just feel like it's hard to find good men. And I just think that's so honorable and like I thought he was a cool guy, but now I'm at this whole different level where like I've never met him, but he has so much of my respect as a person.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I feel that way too. I think that I didn't know about the charities, even though I was watching Hermitcraft for a long time.
Hmm.
I don't think I ever really knew about the live streams or knew about any of that, so I wasn't ever online at the times that they were doing it. But
Sure.
um, it is definitely cool to hear about it now. So that
Hmm.
was really great. Um, Another thing that they talked about was more of his school years and kind of what he did when he was in school.
Hmm.
And they talked about how he was a big part of theater.
Yeah.
That was kind of his world, which we can both relate to. We both
Right.
did theater all through high school.
Skizz was so
Um,
excited to talk about that
yeah, I
with
mean,
him.
it's very apparent, like we talked about it in the last episode, how theatrical and um, just full of stories he is.
Yeah.
And he loves to create stories.
Hmm.
Um, and, that was shown through his Hermitcraft episodes and in the stories that he told on the podcast about his past.
Yeah.
So, hearing about the play that he did was so fun.
Dude, that was wild. I was like, imagine being in high school and going to your theater director and being like, let me write the play. Let
Yeah,
me do XYZ.
crazy.
Let me do all of it. Like, that level
Yeah,
of initiative. And the fact that, like, majority wise, that was to impress a girl, that's crazy. Like,
yeah. Nobody's ever
man
done
had
that for
so
me
much
before.
game. He has so much game.
Yeah,
Ugh. It's crazy. It's injustice. I don't understand.
yeah. The story about him getting his hair covered in mud
Oh my
reminded me
gosh.
of it reminded me of one of the plays that you worked on. I don't think you weren't in it, but
Oh.
I think it was for Beauty and the Beast. Am I right about this? Do you know what I'm
Oh, I
talking
actually
about?
don't know what story you're telling now. Maybe.
There was a person who was playing an older character, and to make his hair white, they dumped baby powder in his hair.
Oh.
Do you remember this?
I actually don't remember that, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah, because he played the father.
Yeah, in Beauty and the Beast.
That's crazy. I
And
can think
that story has stuck with me for so long for absolutely no reason. I don't know why,
that's
but
so
I always
funny.
think about that, and it reminded me of that story.
I know in some of the shows that I was in, because I was in, um, we had two directors in this program, and one tended to do the bigger musical number, like fun shows, and then we had this younger director who really liked to do dark, edgy shows. And so we did
Uh-huh.
A Little Princess, and it had a lot of fog machine, a lot of steampunk. Not quite steampunk. He thought he wanted steampunk, and then he realized quickly that that was not the vibe he was going for. But man, it would have been crazy if that's what we had done.
Yeah.
Um, but in both of those shows, I think, or at least in A Little Princess, we had, Becky was a scullery maid and she was very dirty. I remember in a lot of shows like that, and also shows that we had with orphans, like Oliver Twist, um,
Mhm.
and Annie. They used
Mhm.
you said baby powder, my brain said baby powder. cocoa powder to
Yes.
create the illusion of dirt all over their
Yeah.
dresses, on their face, in their hair.
Yeah.
And that was always really fun for the younger girls that were in the show to like do that, which is good
Yeah.
because it's kind of gross, but I'm glad that they had fun with it. I think I would have as
Yeah.
well if I was in that role.
Yeah. But that just reminded me of that story.
Mm-hmm.
And that happening. I was just like, I remember that happening
That's so
to a
funny.
degree. So that was kind of random, but
Yeah.
he talked a lot about the lore that he carries through his Hermitcraft episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and he brought up something that we talked about a little bit last episode where he was talking about how when people are watching through his videos, they might click on a random episode and not
Yeah.
understand anything that's going on
Literally
and
me.
just not watch
Yeah.
anymore.
I was thinking about that too. As I was watching the podcast, I was like, oh yeah, I literally talked on this point in our recording from last week that I quite literally did that.
Yeah.
Clicking on the finale of season 8, which was probably like the hardest he went with plot, because if he
Yeah.
started his kind of more lore storytelling in season 7, season 8 was so
Yeah.
heavy on that. It had to have gone pretty hard because I was very confused, and I was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. And I think that he is like pulling it a little bit this time around, but um it was funny that he talked about exactly what we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Yeah.
was funny. And then he also talked about editing, and he
Yeah.
talked about learning how to use Premiere Pro. And I
Right.
really relate because I have been editing this podcast and I've been using an editing software because I didn't have Premiere Pro yet and I was going to get it, but I just was waiting. And then when I got Premiere Pro, I literally opened it up and I was like, I really don't have time to figure out how to use this right now. And so I just kept using the one that I was using before. And I haven't taken the time to learn how to use Premiere Pro. It's so much.
Yeah.
And it's scary. But, I guess they all do it. So I guess I can learn. But
I think
this
that
is easy because it's just audio. But, when it comes to making videos, I'll probably use it more.
I feel like the software that he mentioned, that he was still using before Premiere Pro, I can't remember the name of it, but I feel like I just watched a video that Solidarity Gaming Jimmy still uses that.
Yeah, I think I actually saw that too.
Because did you see that video where he was reacting to Etho's desk setup?
Yes, I did.
I still can't get over
Etho
that.
uses it too. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's wild.
Etho is
are you caught up?
a very interesting man.
I know. I wish I knew more about him. He's so intriguing. I am so confused.
Yeah,
But,
I feel like I'm deeply confused and would like to understand more about him. He should come on the podcast soon.
Yeah, I feel like he's too private, but we'll
it's
see,
true. It's true. Yeah. I am not caught up.
Okay. Well, Mumbo did his latest episode was like comparing.
We did the
all
ranking
of the
thing.
people
I
who
saw
had
the
weird
thumbnail.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. I
It's
also
pretty
saw
funny.
him. Was it today that he uploaded a video how he retrained himself not to thumb shift? I saw it and it had been up for 14 minutes, but I was in the middle of watching something else and I had limited time, so I was just like, oh, I'll have to watch it later.
He also learned that he doesn't. I forget what it was. He uses the WASD keys weird too. Like he clicks.
Etho
Mumbo
or
does.
Mumbo? Okay.
Like he has his I don't think he uses his ring finger at all. And then he uses his pointer finger to use the D and the S key.
What do you mean?
He might use his ring finger to move the A key, but only the A key. And then he uses his pointer finger to do D and S.
What do you use to do the S key?
My middle finger.
Yeah, you like move your middle finger down off the W to the S. Yeah, okay, so I do it normal.
Which he didn't even know that he was doing until he was focusing on his hand.
That's so funny.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. But I remember him saying that his pointer finger was doing weird things. And I was like, that's hilarious.
I will say, just kind of like looking at my keyboard, if I were just hitting the shift like for a moment and I wasn't like holding it down, I could see how it'd be a normal movement. But
no, what do you mean? What are you talking about?
It's not the worst, most unnatural thing I've ever done. If you were just going over to like tap it really quick, it makes more sense to use your pinky, but I'm just
tucking your thumb under your other fingers is really not right.
But here's the thing, like I don't hold my shift, I toggle it.
Yeah, you're a weirdo.
I'm not good at Minecraft, that's why. I don't trust myself to hold it. But yeah.
But then your fingers like come off of the keys. Like
no, I could keep my fingers on the key and still touch shift. Maybe I have flexible thumbs. Maybe Mumbo has really flexible thumbs.
He has really huge hands. That's the thing.
But see, my hands are small and I'm not having a problem. So I don't know. I think maybe he's misunderstood. Just kidding. I'll have to watch his video though.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, let's bring it back to Ren and kind of have some closing thoughts. I really liked the last portion of the podcast where they were, just talking about change and different levels of adversity to change. And it was such an interesting perspective on like, he was talking about how he kind of changed his intro and people being like, oh no, Ren, you changed your intro. I don't really like your content anymore. Like, go back to what you had before. And that was just a level of like him being okay with change and his viewers wanting him to step back and stay exactly where he was.
Right.
And it's interesting. It was like, I hadn't really thought about it that way before.
I think that it was also interesting to hear him kind of talk about how he has grown up with his content and just sort of like his energy level and his audience even has grown as his channel has progressed. And, they use the analogy of the river and just sort of like you can't really fight change.
And also go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I think it was also interesting and I think very telling that Skizz was able to identify that he is in a way trying to have a foot in both, where he's trying to stay where he's at and stay comfortable in the circumstances that he's been able to make for himself and his family. But he's also trying to pursue full-time content creation. And
and I will say, like, in his situation, like, his, like, fears tied into, like, why he has a foot in both are really valid and also very admirable, like, in that context. As well, when it comes as far as like staying steady and not like taking risks, it's coming from such a genuine place, and I think it's really speaking of his character that we all know he has, that he's a really stand-up guy, but I love to hear him talk about, it's not from a fear of anything that's directly self, like it is because it has to do with his ability to provide and all of those things, but like
Yeah.
still, like, that is so heavily focused on the love and care for the people around him.
Yeah.
And his desire to do right by them, and I just think that's so cool. But I also do, like, I liked the analogy of the river a lot, and I feel like, you know, them kind of talking about people being very fixated on, like people needing to learn to enjoy the process and be where you
Yeah.
are at the moment in your journey, and not focus so much on what is at the end, because the end is, the end. Which,
Yeah.
personally, for, like, my religious beliefs, the end is a little more, like, infinite, and it's hard to visualize. Like, I don't really believe in a distinct end.
Right.
But it made me think of Pilgrim's Progress, which, genuinely, I don't have memories of reading that book as a child. However, I saw a stage written, like, musical performance of it done in recent years. And
Yeah.
it felt like I didn't, like, I don't know if you read that book as a kid or as an adult.
I read it in high school.
Yeah, so, like,
It's
I
not really a
don't.
kid book.
Yeah, see, that's what I mean by, like, not having read it, because I remember as a kid having, like, a graphic, like, children's book adaptation of it on my bookshelf. I don't ever remember seeing, like, the full book. But I did
Yeah.
think about getting it after I saw this musical.
Yeah.
But, so my understanding, my exposure to it is pretty much solely in the context of this show that I saw. But
Right.
I remember watching it, and the focus on the main character, and just the whole thing was him traveling,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember feeling very, like, a little bit stressed during the process, where I was like, okay, but when's he gonna get there? And is this entire show just gonna be him traveling? Like, what is he gonna stop at any point? Or, and, like, I
Yeah.
guess sort of he does at certain points, and there's, like, roadblocks. But I was like, why is every time he stops, like, a bad thing? And it's, like, bad that he rests or whatever, or has interactions with other people.
Yeah.
And it was a weird thing to wrap my head around, but eventually I kind of got into a headspace of understanding and being able to look back at it and kind of see that it was a parable of life, like.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, that's pretty profound and really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, it made me think of that when I was listening to them talk about that river analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good connection. That book is a really good. It's an allegory. And it gives you a lot of perspective, because what you said was right. Like, why is it bad to rest? Why is it bad to take time and, focus on yourself, really? And, the points in the book where he stops and rests, and are the times when where he's resting in his sorrow, or he's resting in his despair, or he's resting in his anxiety. And all of those things kind of come together when he stops. And it's like, not to say that you should always be going, but it's more like, don't give yourself space to pity yourself. Like, there's no reason to, be so, have feelings about change to the point where you just are in, self pity all the time because of the change that's happened. At a point, you just have to keep going and find the joy that comes with the change, and not just sit in the past.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. Would encourage anyone to read it.
Yeah, I feel like I really should, now that I'm thinking about it again. Like, this has really brought it back to my mind, because it's been a few years since I even saw that production. So,
I can lend you
which
my
it was
copy.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Sounds good. Well,
But
this has been a really fun conversation topic. Good episode.
I'm excited to hear their conversation about music eventually.
Yeah, me too. I was definitely looking forward to that in this episode, and I did, like, the hour did blink. It went really fast. So I hope that they get an opportunity to.
Hopefully it comes and we get to hear it.
Yeah. Well,
but thank you guys so much for listening.
Yeah, it was great to have you, whoever's out there.
Sorry this episode is a little bit late.
Yeah, life happens. Glad we still got to get it recorded.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.